Today's top picks from our commentary arm, Reuters Breaking Views. The 3 lessons JPMorgan can learn from HSBC, and the long-awaited Yahoo deal heaps pressure on Alibaba. With me now to discuss these stories is Reuters Breaking Views Assistant Editor Peter Tal-Larsen. Peter, let's start with JPMorgan and HSBC. You say there are 3 basic lessons that they can learn from HSBC. What are they?
Well, really what we were trying to look at is say, well, JPMorgan got in trouble managing these big reserves that it has, and to basically look at another bank that has a similar balance sheet, in fact a slightly bigger balance sheet than JPMorgan, and say, well, and also has lots of excess deposits, what do they do differently? And there really are 3 lessons. First of all, HSBC is quite strict. HSBC's got something like $400 billion of financial investments, another $150 billion parked with central banks. And what they do is they restrict their reserves to basically government debt or state-backed agencies around the world, US, Europe, Asia, Middle East, etc.
So they're more cautious.
So they're more cautious, and they don't use, unlike JPMorgan, as we understand, they got in trouble trying to use hedges on credit derivatives, using credit derivatives. HSBC says it has no synthetic credit in that portfolio at all. So that's the first thing, it's more cautious. The second thing they do is they disclose how much income that portfolio generates. So every time HSBC reports, you have a line in the earnings that says what they call balance sheet management, that tells you how much income that generated. And that could be a small number or quite a chunky number depending on what's happening to interest rates at the time. JPMorgan, by contrast, apparently that unit made a lot of money, but it's quite hard to work it out from their earnings releases exactly how much money it was generating. So investors have a clearer sense of what's coming out of that portfolio. And the third point is governance. Ina Drew, the woman who is now resigned, who was head of the CIO at JPMorgan, reported directly to Jamie Dimon. So he was basically responsible for overseeing her performance and that of the unit. At HSBC, the balance sheet management is part of the investment bank, so it's overseen by the head of the investment bank, but also by the chief financial officer. So you've essentially got 2 senior executives keeping an eye on what's going on with those reserves.
Now, cynics might say that beyond all that, there's a sense of hubris here for JPMorgan. It's almost as if 2007, 2008 didn't happen, making big risky bets on Wall Street with wads of cash. Isn't there a sense that some banks are just simply too big?
Well, I think that is a bigger question, and I mean, I think the contrast between HSBC and JPMorgan shows you that it can be done differently. But obviously, there is a problem. Just if you've got a balance sheet of $2 trillion and you've got $400 billion in reserves, that in itself creates a problem that a smaller bank wouldn't have on that kind of scale. And for all the we can contrast and say, well, one bank does it better than the other and is better at managing risk. HSBC seems to be very good at managing risk in this balance sheet management portfolio. Didn't extend to their US subprime operation, which cost them tens of billions of dollars in the crisis. So there's always a danger here with banks to say, well, we've done so well this time, we've done well relative to others, and get a bit complacent and then make mistakes.
Might not be as fortunate next time.
Exactly.
Okay, moving on to Alibaba. Now, Alibaba is buying back half of Yahoo's 40% stake in the company for something like $7 billion. That values Alibaba at around $35 billion. So far, so good. But when you look at what that is relative to earnings, it's something of an eye-opener, isn't it?
Well, and this is and the thing is, they need to raise some investment in order to pay for this, to buy this stake back from Yahoo. So the $7 billion will go to Yahoo, of which something like $6.3 billion is cash, and so Alibaba needs to generate some of this from investors, and the valuation will depend on at what price it can sell its shares to investors. Now, the good news is there are quite a lot of sort of pre-IPO investors who were invested in Facebook, who are now sort of coming out, or will be coming out of their lockups quite soon.
Cash rich as well.
And so cash rich and looking for new things to do it. So maybe some of the money from Facebook can go into Alibaba. But the valuation is quite a stretch. It's over 100 times 2011 earnings.
Up to 130 times earnings.
Yeah, exactly. So Alibaba, it's like all these .com companies that have great growth potential, but a lot of that growth is already baked into the valuation, and in order to perform well for investors, they will have to do even more.
With the emphasis more on potential than growth, perhaps?
Well, I think that's always the nature. But at some point, they're actually going to have to generate the earnings to justify this valuation.
Indeed. Peter, thank you very much. That's all for now. My thanks there to Peter Tal-Larsen. For more agenda-setting financial insight, watch our US Breaking Views show every day at 12:30 Eastern, 17:30 British Summer Time. I'm Jamie McGeever. This is Reuters.